Good evening. I'm Stan Mark, Vice Chair of Class Act HR 73, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this evening to the seminar put on by Linda Jackson Sowell called Grant Supremacy, the Art of Professional Proposal Writing and Grantsmanship. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Linda Jackson Sowell, class of 1973, is also a graduate of the Harvard Chan School of Public Health in Health Policy and Management. Linda provides grant-seeking, strategic planning, and presentations that promote philanthropy, grantsmanship, and wellness/health advocacy as a principal of the Abyssinia Group Consulting. She also reviews proposals for federal and state grant programs. She has also served as chair for a number of professional organizations. Linda is also a longtime supporter of HR 73 Class Act, the Harvard Club of Northeast Ohio, and serves as co-president of the Kumba Singers of Harvard College Alumni. Linda, take it away. It's all yours.
It is so good to be with you all today to talk about one of my favorite things in life. My presentation today seeks to share a behind-the-scenes perspective of philanthropy and grantsmanship, and more importantly, how together these complex partnerships can be used to problem solve, build community, innovate, and to quietly do good. I learned what I know, having occupied many of the seats at the table. My introduction to the power of philanthropy and grantmanship took place by happenstance during a student internship at a metropolitan health planning agency that served as a fiscal sponsor of grant projects for groups without a 501c3. During a single year, EMS was designed and unveiled, and a dental insurance benefit was planned and offered to its members by the Meat Cutters Union, both first in the United States. And a group of community conscious physicians and local activists was awarded a grant, and with agency support, they successfully recruited Black physicians to relocate to their underserved community. In the spirit of Class Act, I hope to share some of what I've learned with you. I will not be reading every word of the following PowerPoint. It is intended instead to be a resource for future use, so hopefully copious notes will not be necessary. And the presentation will be recorded for your review, and the proposal outline template that I've developed and the PowerPoint will be available for download on the Class Act website at a later date. The first thing I want to do is to say there is actually a grant writer skill set. Of course, everybody knows about the professional writing part, but I don't think that these other things are quite as considered part of the deal. Research and analysis. To be able to incorporate data and research in grant proposals to convey complex ideas to broad audiences. And about the professional writing, there's one other little piece of it. A good grant writer is a griot, a storyteller who helps bring projects to life. It's way more than words on paper. Writing strategically positions your organization, the community, with funder priorities and expectations, and grant writing sets up a philanthropic partnership that is accessible to small, medium, or larger community organizations. So just because you have a small organization doesn't mean that you can't do this. Research and analysis. The proposal, need, or problem statement is probably one of the most important parts of the proposal because it justifies its purpose, because it is data-driven, the ability to present it so both understood and justifiable will help make the case for content and approach. The perception of centers of excellence tied to outcomes, reputation of program leadership in their fields, grant-seeking experience can provide a competitive advantage. And knowing which projects will engender executive buy-in is also important, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who represent the organization, and they want to make certain that the money comes in, to make certain that the strategic plan, high objectives are met. There are some other skill sets that I'm going to talk about on the next slide that I think are typically not really thought about, and they add value. The griot skills, the mastery of heartfelt storytelling, makes people pay attention and understand themselves and make it so broader audiences feel that it's important, beginning with internal stakeholders and then with potential funders. And so proposal cultivation is something that I don't think people really think that much about. And it doesn't have to be long. As we just heard, questions need to be one sentence. The story has to be not that much longer than that. An extra person skilled in program development is useful in fine-tuning program skills, program goals, objectives, and activities. Program evaluation is a specialized skill that must be tied to program monitoring goals and objectives. And those evaluators are often consultants, and they stand back and they can see your program, your organization, your project from a perspective that people who are right there doing it every day cannot do. And consultants are also useful when program staff is inexperienced in proposal preparation or without strong relationships in the funder community. And if multiple proposal due dates are close together, bringing in a consultant may allow the organization to submit both. So basically speaking, we have a mission today: to activate the griot in you and to see grant seeking somewhat differently. So I hope that you leave with those two things at hand. First of all, grants truly are venture capital. And I'm sure there are some finance people in the audience, so I hope that you can see it quite from that perspective. Because people can try things for their not-for-profits, which are typically not known for having tons and tons of money, to make creative program change without risking their nonprofit budget, and to incentivize innovation. Testing existing programs with new underserved populations, and also capacity building is often used to build capacity, to broaden fund development from grants to individual fundraising, and such projects funding is often multi-year. Success is often gauged by break-even, raising enough money to fund their salary, and then moving on to profits. So the next category is grant makers. What I have done here is listing all the types of foundations there are: independent, family, corporate, which are company sponsored, operating private foundation, and non-operating private foundations. And believe it or not, community foundations technically aren't foundations at all. They are public charities. So here is a comparison. So you know the difference between operating foundations and non-operating foundations, both of which many people have never heard of. But when you look at these categories, you can really see that there are some distinct differences. And private non-operating foundations are actually about 91% of all foundations. Then there's private foundations, which include the operating, the non-operating, the family foundations, independent foundations. They are funded by a single person or a small group, serve as philanthropic partners to charities versus operating the programs they fund. And while it is allowable, private foundations typically do not fundraise. And that is a distinct difference between public charities, which most of their funds are coming from the public. A number of their foundation funds come from endowed fund income, and they end up having a diverse base of public support through their board of trustees. Independent foundations, as you see, I talked about earlier, but what I wanted you to see here is with two foundations that most people have heard of, that they can be an operating and non-operating. And as you see, everybody knows about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but you may not know that it's the second largest foundation in the world and the largest in the United States. Ford Foundation isn't shabby either, and they are a non-operating, which falls in the category of 91%. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are an operating because they are so involved in the programs that they fund. The next slide that I want to talk about is community foundations, which are largely funded by the public donations, including donor-advised funds. They're well-staffed, have multiple program areas, donor and staff-directed grant awards, and they typically serve charities in their local geographic area. And unrestricted funds are often reserved in event something unexpected comes up in the community that needs funding. And living in Cleveland, I happen to know a lot about community foundations and am involved with them. One, because for many years, I was a director of corporate and foundation development for Cleveland State University, which meant that I was there often talking to people, program officers, etc. It is the oldest, and it used to be the largest, is now the third largest with $3 billion in assets as of 2023. And a recent entrance to this field is the Silicon Valley Foundation, which, as you see, is huge with $13.6 billion. About family foundations. The family plays substantial roles in these foundations, and they can be very small to very large. And many of them restrict giving to pre-selected organizations. They may not accept unsolicited proposals. And in many cases, if you want to consider a family foundation, if you find contact difficult, it's because in many cases, they don't have a lot of staff. And the next two slides, this slide and the next slide, I have something to show. Please pay attention here to the Lilly Endowment, which has 20 billion in assets. And I'm sure many of you have heard of the MacArthur Foundation. Both of these are examples of huge family foundations. And the point that I'm going to make is that there are related foundations that are different foundation types. In this case, there may be Lilly stock involved because it is owned by the family, but it is funded by the family and not the corporation. If you'll notice, Eli Lilly is an example that I use for for the corporate foundations. It's the same family as for the Lilly Endowment. The difference is this is their corporate foundation. And as you see, both of them are relatively large. The interesting part about corporate foundations is that they are stated assets aren't always indicative of annual grant awards because some corporations fund their foundations annually. Charitable interests are not always publicized. Know that there are multiple foundations with names that may confuse the grant seeker, that you might have to do a little research to figure out which is a family and which is a corporate. And many of them have their names on both. Asset levels may also fluctuate significantly for corporate foundations because based upon their corporate success and stock levels, which can impact how much is in their pot and available for donation. Now, for corporations versus foundations, there are some significant differences between corporations and foundations. For one, corporations often give money out of their foundation, which is a separate legal area, but also within their organization is where in many cases they have sponsorships and what have you. And just know that if you're trying to build a relationship with a corporation, a good place to start is by going to their HR or marketing department, because that's where they give small amounts of money. Like if somebody has a golf outing or a community program, they might be willing to sponsor that organization's activity. And then that will lead to relationship building that can lead to ultimately some money coming from them, from their foundation. Foundations, on the other hand, longer proposals required. Large foundations have more funding interest. They're likely to have published priorities and guidelines and to reflect the individual donor giving patterns. Whereas for corporations, some people even say it's not always that philanthropic because they're trying to give money where they have corporate interests, where they have operating sites, where they have employees. And corporate foundations, especially, and also giving programs, they always want the people who they fund to acknowledge them in the community because they feel that it may improve their relationship with the community. And then there's the government and private grants. With government funders, they have very strict and very detailed guidelines. As was said earlier in the introduction, I do grant reads for government agencies. Their guidelines are usually north of 50 pages. It takes a lot of effort, and they expect you to follow those to the letter. They promote federal policies. The proposals are longer than the guidelines. They're not influenced by personal contacts, whereas you might have some influence on the private funder side. There's usually only one deadline per year. And the proposal reviews are public information, whereas with private foundations, not so much. In recent years, government proposal reviews have become considerably more detailed as applicants and the government officials representing their districts have become more interested in monitoring who gets funding because they are interested in funding from those federal programs coming to their districts that they serve. For those of you who have been involved in grantsmanship, I'm sure that these program areas are familiar. The arts, education, environmental issues, health and human services is a huge area, as well as social programs. And research is largely government grants, although, as you know, they do a lot of work in the arts and education. Is your institution grantsmanship ready? I think that that's something important to know before you go into this, because if you don't know these things, you're not likely to be able to impress program officers at foundations and corporations. They want to make certain that you know what your vision and culture is and your strategic plan, because what they want to fund is something that's going to make a difference for your organization and for your community. And they want to know if you're capable of doing it. They don't want you to apply to do something that you don't know how to do. So they want to make certain that you have good administration for your project. And they also are interested in your showing as an organization that you think enough of this project, that your organization is willing to contribute dollars, in-kind support, one way or the other. And last but not least, if you don't have a good reputation in the community, they may not be interested in funding you. So it's very important to build those relationships before you go grants seeking. They want to make certain that you're familiar with community stakeholders, because after all, the projects are typically serve communities, and as well as foundations, corporations, other nonprofit organizations, which have similar interests, as well as the communities to be served by the project. Stakeholder support often shows up in these proposals in the form of letters of support, participation in project committees, surveys, and encouragement of community participation. Finding the right funder. I think it's important to know how to find where you want to submit your proposal. And it's not necessarily that self-explanatory. One of the things I like to tell people is look at your competition, see who they get their money from for their similar projects, which are likely highlighted in their annual reports. Go to the foundations that you think might be a good fit, because they publish their awards. And for the organizations that are similar, that have similar programs, you'll get to know whether that's something that will work for you. And know your competition and who funds them. One organization is fairly old, but then is new. You may have heard of the Foundation Center Library and GuideStar. In 2019, they merged to form Candide. GuideStar is research, verify, and analyze nonprofits by location, serve IRS, information, number of employees, etc. And the Foundation Center still helps organizations fund grants. They have over 300,000 grant maker profiles. But one of the things that is different now is that they require subscriptions. The Foundation Center of Cleveland was one of their 5 sites in the country. They have recently announced plans to redirect in-person library services to local community partners, which means that if you live in one of the areas where there was a Foundation Center library, they'll likely follow suit. Preparing for project cultivation. The sentence, the paragraph, and the elevator speech. The sentence is the best way of figuring out what your project is to try to capsulize it in a single sentence. then stretch it to a paragraph, and then imagine yourself in an elevator with the CEO of Bill Gates. He's not going to want to go up to the 50th floor with you. You have to say what you want to say to interest him between floor 1 and floor 2. And all of these things are good for cultivation, but they're also good for proposal writing. Cultivation strategies, networking, pre-submission contact with funders, LOIs, letter of inquiry. Some organizations allow you to decide whether you want to send one. Others, and this is fairly recent, they insist that you do a letter of inquiry before you meet with them so that they know what you're going to talk about. And some of them also require an LOI, and they use that to decide who they will invite to submit a full proposal. These pre-submission contacts are opportunities to make your case, and you have to figure out who you want to attend. Maybe it's the program officer. Maybe it's a vice president of a certain area. And then seek opportunities to increase your organizational visibility by corporate sponsorships. I think that LOIs is by choice a very good idea. So be sure and do that when you can. Proposal building strategies. I mentioned concept development, the sentence and the paragraph, refining your storytelling skills in the elevator speech, and creating content from your notes and bullet points from the proposal outline. And don't forget, you have access to a proposal outline that you can use that I've provided for you that will be on the Class Act website. And here's the proposal outline categories: cover letter and executive summary. Those are important, and the cover letter should come from your CEO or executive director, because if they're not interested, a funder is likely to think that they're wasting their time moving forward. Consider including a copy of the institution's strategic plan, highlighting the high priority that will be supported by the proposed project, and highlight any financial or in-kind contributions contributed by the grant-seeking organization or others in your project budget. And here's some more areas in the proposal outline. Resolution of challenges. That's a fairly new thing in some applications. They want to know what problems do you think you might encounter in the process of your proposed project. And then they want to know how you feel that you'll be able to overcome them. Program evaluation. That's a skill set that many people don't have. And there are many organizations that insist that you get an outside evaluator to make certain that it's on point. And the program evaluation should tie back to the goals and objectives, because that's what you said you were going to do. And the program evaluation says if you did it or not. Personnel, budget, and budget justification. And budget justification should always roll back to the narrative so that you can tell that you're just not throwing some numbers out there, but they're tied very succinctly with the program narrative. Sustainability. What's going to happen to your project once the money runs out? Are you going to make it more efficient? Are you have in mind some other funders? Or here's something that a lot of people do. They find another way of going after foundation money by, say, directing the project that they have put together and focusing it on a different population. The proposal, we talked a bit about the cover letter. It should include organization introduction, function, institutional support. And because you don't want it to be super long, one project research justification to demonstrate the fit with the funder mission, because it is not just about you, because you're trying to get their money, and to excite them, you have to go prepare something that they like. And how much money you're requesting, which of course is the most important of all. The executive summary, 4 to 6 paragraphs max. Reason for the grant application, why your organization is best positioned to develop and carry out the project. That's something that a lot of people don't think about, but I think is very important. Project vision and purpose, problem to be solved, and calculating success within the established timeline, because it can't go on forever. You have a grant period to deal with, and so you have to show that you have plans to get what you're going to have done in that time period. Problem need statement. Clearly define the project to be addressed, the target population and location, the significance of the project, the gap it will fill. And it's important to justify your call for action. Literature search, experience-based and statistics or other concrete objective information, and study annual reports of similar organizations. Because of experience with thesis preparation and other academic writing, many faculty may be more adept at approaching this section of the proposal. And documentation for less research-oriented, staff-driven projects, documentation is just as important. Need assessment is very much leads to project goals. The words that you use are very important. Decrease, increase, produce, deliver. And examples, the project will increase reading test scores. The project will pilot existing programs with a new population. Do not think that buying a computer is a project goal, because then what is goal? What is the goal? Having it delivered and sitting on a desk plugged in? And a staff person isn't a project goal. What is it? Because that means that they've been hired and they're sitting at the desk. They do not reflect project success. These tools may be included because without them, you cannot accomplish project goals. Statement of goals. What do you propose to do to impact the problem? Feasibility, institutional resources, timeframe, meeting an unmet need, new approach to an old problem, working with a new population. As grant seekers ponder their options, we recommend that they plan carefully to decide upon significant yet achievable goals that are both tangible and documentable during the project evaluation. Methodology, research and experience-based. How are you going to accomplish it? How unique is your approach? Does your project impact an underserved population or make your approach worthy of replication? So it's all about building a win-win. And many of you have heard of SMART objectives. It applies to grant seeking too. They are barometers that concisely describe, define, and communicate intended outcomes, track progress, and evaluate impact. Program evaluation. Define the purpose and scope, build an evaluation plan to answer issues posed by proposed goals and objectives. And if you don't have internal capability, hire a professional project evaluator. Evaluation plan details. Monitor progress by specified metrics and key performance indicators, such as pre and post grant term surveys, testing, participation levels with interim assessments and project adjustments as necessary. Consult with the stakeholders, partners, staff, funders, program participants to guide the evaluation, design, and implementation and report dissemination activities broadly. If necessary, budget for a trained program evaluator to guide the design, implementation, data analysis, and reporting. And every proposal has a budget and a budget justification. The budget must be detailed, reasonable, in alignment with project plan and funder allowable costs. That's where a thorough review of the guidelines put out there by the funder is absolutely important. Staff and new hires listed, quantified by FTE, functionally explained in the budget justification. Match funds and in-kind contributed to extend the project impact. You have to document that as well. But make certain that as you look at each of those budget items, go back to the project narrative and make certain that they're all taken care of and described in detail in the budget justification. Okay, I would just like to say stewardship is relationship building, and it's important, as well as sustainability. And when you have limited grant experience, begin small with proposal asks of $50,000 or less.
Terrific. So the floor is open for questions.
Where would you advise a small NGO? We have only a couple employees in our organization, but we're looking for about a $50,000 grant for a public project donating software. Where would you start looking for a grant? And I think we represent a lot of the nonprofit organizations that are probably looking on right now. We don't need a lot of money, but 50,000 would be a good place to start. Where should we start?
For one, don't say that you're looking for software. Start with what you need the software to do. Then to say that the software will allow us to expand our target population, it will allow us to do things more efficiently, and then say that software is such and such, and if we have it, we'll be able to do better. And I think that's important.
Where would you go for looking for a good source for a grant specifically?
What is your program area?
Global health.
Global health? I would say, we know that the Gates Foundation is very much interested in global health. And I would also say that, I would look at their guidelines and I would look at who it is that they fund and to see if it's anybody you know. The other thing is I would look, where are you located?
California. And our projects are all in the low-income world.
I would look at in your state to see who is doing that kind of work. Maybe with the people who work in the fields and what have you. I'm sure there are a lot of organizations that are working with those people who are coming over the border and what have you, and to see if any of them have gotten grant support. The United Nations, I would imagine, would be a good organization to talk to, because everybody who is a good contact is not necessarily a funder, but they know where all the funders are. And I would think that that would be an area where some government funding may be useful.
Thank you.
Does that help you? Does that help?
Yeah, I was hoping that you would tell me a source that really, like the foundation directory, that would be a little bit less cumbersome to go through to look for grants that were of the small size, $50,000, that we weren't aware of already.
Are there organizations that you know of who get grant funding? Look in their annual reports.
That's a really good suggestion. We have done that. There is indeed one organization that's very much like ours in Boston that we're going to look at it for that purpose.
I'm looking at small nonprofits and how to find and apply for grants that help with transitioning through new and digital technology, specifically how to receive cryptocurrency donations and how to make payments in cryptocurrency when that's involved in the transaction. I'm in Ohio, actually. I noticed from your biography that you are too.
Whereabout?
I'm in Cincinnati, but the specific nonprofit is 50 miles to the east in Brown County. It's an educational historic preservation site involved in the Underground Railroad. So it's got historic preservation restrictions, and it's trying to transition into websites, Wi-Fi, cryptocurrency donations, the full breadth of new and digital technology, which isn't easy.
Have you ever worked with the Underground Railroad Museum? And looked at their annual report to see where they get their funding from?
I will do that.
I believe Cincinnati has a foundation, a community foundation. That's one thing about Ohio. There's a number of community foundations that serve the local community in Columbus, Cleveland, and I believe in Cincinnati. I would try to set up a meeting with a program officer to see if they have any ideas for what you might do.
We have received something from Duke Energy and Ohio Humanities, a couple on that end. So we're doing fairly well. And part of the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, what you mentioned, is named after our site, their library.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So they know about us. So I don't know if they think that would be a conflict of interest, possibly. But we'll look and see where they get their money from.
Well, they would tell you, but you won't know if you don't ask.
It's public. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Ellen, unmute and go ahead.
I have just a general question on Linda. Do you have any advice about when they ask a question that you can't answer, how do you respond? An example is demographic data that your organization doesn't track. How do you handle not being able to provide data?
Do you have some data? Do you typically have some data? Because just because you don't have one or two certain pieces, that's different from not collecting any data at all. Because as I was sharing with the needs assessment, they all expect you to have data-driven proposals. So, but if you don't have one thing, you can say, well, I'll get back with you.
Well, one example is zip codes. And we have zip code information for maybe 15% of our clients, but not for all of it. So it would be extrapolating to say exactly how we match the service area of the funder.
Well, and then there's always a possibility of a grant proposal to be able to provide.
There you go. Sure.
I'm not kidding. That's capacity building.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Sarah.
Good luck. An Ohio person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we seem to be seeing a huge number of donor advised funds coming across the organization. I'm a consultant and we work with social services organizations and arts organizations. And it just seems like there's this growing plethora of donor advised funds, and it's very hard to get access to what they are interested in, what they care about. You know, it's just not the same profile. Like, I mean, I use GuideStar all the time for the regular foundations, but it just seems much more murky when you get to family foundations and donor advised funds. And I wondered if you could give us any advice on how we can get better access. Are there ways to get clear access to what they care about?
It is murky. And that was one of the reasons why I tried to, to talk about all these connections. The best source of some of this is through the community foundations. They seem to know most, they house a lot of them. And if you get a community foundation grant, they usually list endowed funds that are part of the grant that is provided. I would start there.
Okay.
I'm assuming that everybody present will very soon get a grant award. And to that I say, don't forget to send them a thank you note.
Good. So,
And thank you for the opportunity.
Linda, thank you, and thank all of you for attending and those who asked the great questions. Thank you and good evening. Enjoy your summer.